Pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum.
Ah, damn it, and I thought I was done talking about Carrie. The story of Carrie and Quasimodo are one of the most tragic and misunderstood figures. They're the ugly ducklings in their story. One is considered to be a monster with a big heart who wants to fit in, and the other is a tormented soul who wants to fit in, but is turned into a monster at the end. They attend to a party where they're given a royal title until it ends in a humiliating prank. They're social misfits, outcasts, and frequently experience religious abuse. They're placed into a spiritual system outside of their control, but rather than bring them peace and comfort as it's supposed to, it brings nothing but pain and humiliation by their tyrannical guardians. Both of the stories were brought up as novels with religious themes in it, while Stephen King has admitted to have some religious belief.
I've made a decision to believe in God because it's better to believe than not to believe.
He's not blind to admit the dangers of religion in most of his books.
Any religion without love and compassion is false!
Even though The Hunchback of Notre Dame was written to preserve the cathedral in 1831 by Victor Hugo, it also comments on the church's abuse of power. This video is not an attack on faith or God, this is more of a character study between victim and abuser, Carrie White and Margaret White, Quasimodo and Judge Claude Frodo, and how religion can be used to take advantage of the needy. Now let's get a little edgy. Carrie! Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. What did they have in common?
They should have gone with Scientology!
While we shouldn't disregard religion's good humble deeds that it's brought up, we shouldn't disregard the atrocities that it's brought up as well. Since the dawn of civilization, religion has been used by the most fortunate to either hold their position of power or to keep the people under their control. Some of these abusive tactics can be psychological, where the leader intimidates the individual of facing eternal damnation, or he uses their most vulnerable weak spots against them in order to control them.
Do you know how it feels to think Jehovah is punishing you all the time?
The abuse can also be emotional, when facing humiliation in front of their congregation or the fear of social banishment.
Louisa Whitling is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
The abuse can also be sexual by the leader himself.
And when a priest pays attention to you, it's a big deal. Until one day he asks you to jerk him off or give him a blowjob, and so you go along with that too.
And the abuse can also be physical, which implies punishment, torture, or in the extreme of measures, death. Now, this shouldn't be made to generalize all religious leaders as bad people, but when they allow their position of power to go deep into their head that they are special, how they're divinely chosen by God, then in their mind, they can get away with anything, because that's the will of God.
I'm the man of God here. I meet the qualifications. I run this church, and if you don't like it, then get out.
Ultimately, this spiritual abuse can result on taking away the individual's faith, hope, and sense of morality if these people in authority represent God.
And when a priest does this to you, he robs you of your faith. So you reach for the bottle or the needle.
Religious abuse doesn't necessarily need to take place in a congregation. It can be as personal and as intimate as at home by a parental figure. In the case of Carrie and Disney's version of The Hunchback, their lives have been shaped through fear of punishment and social isolation from the world. Both of their self-confidence is utterly destroyed under the fear of bullying or humiliation.
He's gonna laugh at you. They're all gonna laugh at you.
Out there they will hate and scorn and jeer.
Carrie was raised through physical abuse, getting beaten, punished by her mother, and locked in a closet for hours to pray for forgiveness at some creepy religious images. In the book, it's much more disturbing how she would be locked up for days, almost dying from starvation and suffocation. Quasimodo was raised with emotional abuse, for a time as the medieval days when people wouldn't show much compassion to disabled people, other than to use them for entertainment. Frollo doesn't physically hurt him, but he makes him believe that no one would befriend him or accept him for his deformity.
I am a monster, you know.
He told you that?
Look at me.
Instead of raising him out of compassion, he exploits his deformity to use him for personal gain.
Dear Quasimodo, I always knew you would someday be of use to me.
The way their guardians operate is not on a healthy fellowship, but control over their lives. They place enormous amount of shame over their bodies as sinful, whether it's Carrie's sexual awakening when she has her first period, not knowing what it is,
You should have told me, Mama. You should have told me.
or Quasimodo's deformity when before it was believed physical disabilities were a judgment of God for their past sins or from their parents.
A baby? A monster.
Margaret and Frollo dominate their curiosity of the outside world by feeding them their twisted view of the world as evil.
Everyone isn't bad, Mama. Everything isn't a sin.
All my life you have told me that the world is a dark, cruel place.
Thus, they discourage them from having any social contact so they can remain ignorant and dependent of them.
You can stay here with me.
And stay in here.
But while Frollo believes Quasimodo wouldn't have any friends, Margaret believes Carrie shouldn't have any friends. This distinguishes where their influence comes from. Whereas Frollo is influenced by the acceptance of social standards, Margaret is influenced by personal dominions. And when their guardians can no longer contain them, either they've grown stronger in their abilities to defy their masters, Carrie having telekinetic powers, or Quasimodo being as agile as Spider-Man, then that's when they attempt to kill them. But ultimately, it backfires at them. However, that doesn't mean the victims live long enough to have a happy ending. Compared to Disney's happy ending with Quasimodo, in the book he kills Frollo and then dies from starvation in the beach holding Esmeralda's dead corpse. The high school teacher, Tommy and Sue, could represent the gargoyles, who both stopped Carrie and Quasimodo's confidence and encouraged them to integrate into society. Tommy could represent Esmeralda for being the victim's romantic attachment for as short of a little time as they could enjoy. The reason I wanted to do this video was to mostly talk about Margaret White and Judge Frollo. They're the main antagonists of their stories and the main cause of pain to the main victims. They're both extremely pious to their fate, whereas Margaret is a mentally unstable fanatic. Frollo persecutes those who don't share his same beliefs. Their actions are despicable because they use religion to justify it, meaning that in the long run, their actions of violence and abuse will lead to positive results. The book explains a much more disturbed Margaret, where she developed her extremist views on her own, after witnessing the religious hypocrisy of her parents, giving her a self-righteous attitude, and condemning everyone into hell.
The children are wandering through the wilderness of sin these days, Mrs. Snell. My Sue is a good girl. These are godless times, Mrs. Snell.
Frollo in the book started as a decent man who is given into madness for his lust over Esmeralda. In the Disney movie, he's as self-righteous as Margaret, starting off as cold-blooded and ending as a cold-blooded monster.
Of my virtue I am justly proud.
But the main cause of their destructive nature could be their sexual repression. It's a state where the person is prevented from expressing themselves sexually, or they feel guilt and shame associated with sexual impulses. Both had sexual encounters that they suppress because their devotion fills them with guilt and shame from something that is normal to feel. The body is wired up to enjoy sex, but their mind is wired up to feel guilt, depending where the individual was brought up. In most studies have shown that people with religious backgrounds tend to struggle more with sexual desires than secular people. Most likely they will be prone to having sexual fantasies, watch pornography or masturbation, due to placing so much shame and guilt over it. The more something seems forbidden, the more curious someone will be. Even after marriage, sex suppression can be problematic after being brought up with such a bad stigma about sex. The dark reality about sex repression is that it may lead to depression, anxiety, and anger, causing the individual to take extreme violent methods such as pedophilia or rape. In the book, Frollo isn't a judge, he's a bishop, and Esmeralda is no older than 16 years old. This would place him into the pedophilia category, but being a Disney movie, we gotta tone down its rated R content. So instead it's played off as a forbidden, obsessive lust. It's forbidden because Frollo is extremely religious and Esmeralda is a gypsy, two opposite worldviews. But his lustful desires become an obsession to the point he takes his frustrations on the city in order to find her.
I'll find her if I have to burn down all of Paris.
In his sexual suppression, Frollo takes extremely violent methods, not just on the people of Paris, but is willing to burn Esmeralda if it means ending his source of temptation, taking no accountability for the feelings he can't control.
Be mine or you will burn!
He doesn't view Esmeralda as a person, but as a sin, just as he views Quasimodo as a sin and a cursed child.
This is an unholy demon. I'm sending it back to hell where it belongs.
Margaret is a different case. Her first sexual experience was through rape by her drunken husband, giving birth to Carrie. This left her confused when admitting that she enjoyed it.
I smelled the whiskey on his breath, and he took me. And I liked it. I liked it.
Although she doesn't crave sex, she suppresses the idea that sex can be enjoyed as she first did. In the book, as in the movie, Margaret belongs in this Christian cult that believes the original sin was sex in the Garden of Eden.
First sin was intercourse. First sin was intercourse. First sin was intercourse.
And the first sin was intercourse.
This belief was invented in the 370s BCE by Saint Augustine, a bishop and a womanizer. Because of his sexual drive, which led him to sex guilt for his devotion, he started to portray a bad image on the pleasures of sex. And for the longest, he interpreted the fruit in Genesis as lust, desire, or sex when Eve gave it to Adam. Even though this contradicts God's command in Genesis when he said to be fruitful and multiply to Adam and Eve, in other terms that means have as much sex as you want. Regardless, this shaming view would dominate parts of their region and would carry on in modern Western civilization. In Margaret's twisted view about sex, she demoralizes sexuality and the natural anatomy of the body, placing shame, guilt, and severe punishment on Carrie for getting involved with anything sexual like her first menstruation, wanting to date boys, or go to the prom. If Margaret took the ideals of St. Augustine into extreme measures, this is what she would have come up with. You can have sex, but only to have children. You can have sex, but not to enjoy it. You can have sex, but not to know your partner. Female bodies are shameful. Female bodies are sinful.
I can see your dirty pillows. Everyone will.
They're called breasts, and every woman has them.
Carrie, being the result of a bird rape, would develop Margaret's love and hate relationship towards her. She loves her as a daughter. At the same time, she hates her for being a product of sex, a product of sin. In her mind, Carrie's not a person, she's the devil, one that would fully manifest at the end.
Witch. That's Satan's power.
Carrie's a scary story because it invokes children's fears about puberty and the changes their bodies go through. It is the fact that our innocence develops more sexually in a culture that doesn't understand sexuality or doesn't want to out of fear of falling into immorality. Carrie's telekinesis is a metaphor for sexual awakening shown when she first uses it during her first menstruation, when she's upset, and during the prom when she kills all the students. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is an inner beauty tale that portrays Quasimodo as the symbolic heart and beauty of the cathedral, while reflecting the outward ugliness of those that run it. This video might sound all over the place, starting off with religious themes into let's all get laid type of message, but spiritual as well as physical can also be linked into religious abuse. It controls the body and the mind of the individual, stripping them away from their free will, as well as leaving them with guilt and shame. This could probably be one of my darkest videos I've done so far, based on how much taboo there is to discuss. Carrie's full of creepy imagery, and is the only one to legitimately terrify me, even to this day. Mixing it with one of Disney's most darkest animated movies, based from a dark book, you get a very depressing comparison. In the end, it all comes down from distinguishing the God that loves and those who see corruption everywhere except within. I don't want to add any more pessimism into our dark reality, but Since every year keeps getting darker, I'm surprised our wedding proposals haven't gone darker yet. Seriously, how come we haven't gone from, "You're the apple of my eye, will you be my bride?" into something more like this. Seriously, how come that hasn't become a wedding proposal meme yet? So, what do you thought about these movies? Do you like them? Do you not like them? Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you liked this video, leave a like and subscribe for more content. Well guys, tune in next time because when I get back, I'll be comparing Marilyn Monroe with Megan Fox. Well, I hope that didn't come out wrong. See you next time. Ciao.
Pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum.